I mean, I completely agree with that. And also, you also strike me as, or not strike me, I know this for a fact, that you are a very well-read and widely read individual. And you obviously know the importance of reading and the value that it has. So what would you say to a young person like myself who is desperate to learn as much as they can from much more experienced people like yourself, and who just wants to sit down and just read as much as possible and try and absorb as much as possible?
An underappreciated person is Thomas Sowell. There are two books in particular that I think were brilliant: The Knowledge and Decisions, and another one called A Conflict of Visions.
Love it.
Yeah, wonderful books. And he also would probably list as influential upon him. In fact, I know he does, Popper and Hayek, the two you've mentioned. But he's in a different league for me. That guy really nails this concept of why centralization is so dangerous, and especially in Knowledge and Decisions, he spends a lot of time just pointing to the real dangers of centralization, the accumulation of or concentration of power.
Look at you bring in another one of my heroes. It happens all the time.
Yeah,
sure.
So Sowell, but as a general piece of advice, let's step away from the individuals and the names. A rule of thumb is to favor older books. Way too much of what people spend their time reading is this week's bestseller. And what I noticed is that there are many books, most books, that get onto a bestseller list are forgotten about very quickly. What does that tell you? It means that they weren't really that good quality books. They spoke to some kind of passing fad or fashion and were not durable and did not contain much truth or much knowledge. Passing the test of time is a very good sign that a book contains knowledge. And it's a good discipline to wait, give yourself a number and say, right, 3/4 of the books that I'm going to read are going to be more than 20 years old. In my case, I used the number 50. I tried to make half the books I read more than 50 years old. And it was a loose rule of thumb. I probably was in breach of it all the time. But that's the idea, is never forget to read the old books. Because those are the ones that it's not so much that the ideas retain freshness. A lot of the time the ideas are quite old, but the book's still there because you're peering into the mind of the person who really understood the concept, the developer of the concept. And the clarity and the perspective that comes with that is often just can't be replicated, even by writers 50 years later, possessed of much more knowledge and technology and capacity to do research and all sorts of things, are unable to improve upon. So I think that's an important one, is, and it kind of echoes the whole notion of the Popperian Deutschian analysis that all knowledge generation is fundamentally evolutionary. Well, what is evolution about? It's about passing tests, the test of time. So we evolve a canonical literature, a literary canon that contains the books that people still read hundreds of years after they were written. And that canon is interestingly under attack at the moment. It's regarded as some kind of, to say what I've just said is somehow regarded as to make a sort of a culturally superior statement or some kind of, I don't care who wrote the book. I don't care what country he comes from.
Yeah.
The fact that people are reading what that person wrote 100 or 500 or 2,000 years ago tells you something about the quality of that person's thoughts, whether he was from, Egypt or Rome or America or wherever. It doesn't matter. The book's still being read. Read it. It might tell you something. And so there's an evolved canonical literature. There's nothing wrong with that idea. It's epistemologically sound that books that pass the test of time are recommended to people. What's wrong with that idea? So I think that's important. And then also just to be constantly mindful of the proportion of books, media articles out there that are truly terrible. if you read them and don't dismiss them, your mind is being polluted with falsehoods. Almost everything that's written at the moment in mainstream media is of this nature. And then it's either completely false or you're wasting your time reading it. It's irrelevant. People need to be mindful of that, not to get trapped into reading too much about current affairs, not to reading too many newspapers, thinking that it's important to stay up to date. I think it's a very dangerous, pernicious little notion. And so I push people away from that. I think once before we spoke about the gel man hypothesis. I won't repeat the story, but this idea that you kind of, if you look at how your own field of expertise is reported on in media, you will realize very quickly it's terribly done. And this is true for everybody's field. When they look at their own field, they regard the media as poor. So the extension is that, well, in that case, maybe if all the experts in the industries agree that the articles in their industry are terrible, then all of that means kind of that all of the stuff is terrible. That's in this very high production rate press. So don't be scared of moving away from that